Trump has revealed new details of the peace plan to end the war. Now, instead of 28, it contains 22 points. Moreover, according to the US president, the initial points were not a real plan, but merely a concept. In addition, Trump has cancelled the deadline for Kyiv to accept the agreement, which was supposed to expire tomorrow. Moreover, he emphasized that he has not set any deadlines at all for reaching a peace agreement between Ukraine and Russia. At the same time, the American president is confident in the progress of negotiations with Ukraine and Russia and claims that Moscow has allegedly agreed to certain concessions, namely to halt its advance on the front and to cease fire. Negotiations are ongoing, and the key issues, territories, ceasefire, and security guarantees, are still being discussed, including with Europe, and according to Trump, European countries are heavily involved in the process.
It was just a map. It wasn't a plan, it was a concept. At first, there were 28 points, then they were reduced to 22. Many of them have already been resolved, and that's very favorable. Let's see what happens. I don't have any deadline. You know what the deadline is for me? When it's all over, everyone is tired of fighting. They're losing too many people.
The US President's special representative, Steve Witkoff, essentially acted as an unofficial advisor to the Kremlin, explaining how Moscow should present its peace deal proposals in a way that would appeal to Trump. Bloomberg News published the transcript of a phone conversation between Witkoff and Putin's aide, Yuri Ushakov, from October 14th. This recording, which lasts over 5 minutes, reveals the methods used by the US Special Representative in communicating with Russia and explains the emergence of the 28-point peace plan proposed by Washington. In particular, Witkoff advised organizing a call from Putin to Trump before Ukrainian President Zelensky's visit to the White House on October 17th, using the Gaza agreement as a pretext. He suggested that Putin congratulate Trump on reaching the agreements and highlight the role of the American president in the peace process. Witkoff also proposed developing a 20-point peace plan for Ukraine, similar to the ceasefire agreement in Gaza. During the conversation, there was talk of a possible territorial exchange, including Donbas, but the U.S. Special Envoy advised discussing this delicately. 2 days later, Trump and Putin held a lengthy phone conversation, which the American leader described as productive. They announced preparations for a meeting in Budapest, which was later cancelled, and President Zelensky's visit on October 17th took place in a tense atmosphere without the promised assistance in the form of Tomahawk missiles. It is unknown which specific Russian proposals were taken into account in the final version of the 28-point plan. However, after this, Washington began persuading Kyiv to agree to the deal. Donald Trump, responding to the leaked recording of the conversation, stated that he sees nothing unusual in such consultations, since a mediator is supposedly supposed to sell the terms to both sides. At the same time, Trump himself did not listen to the recording, but suggested that Witkoff might have advised similar things to Ukraine as well.
I haven't heard it, but that's a standard thing. He has to sell this to Ukraine and sell Ukraine to Russia. That's how a deal maker works. You have to say, look, they want this, and you have to convince them of it. That's the standard form of negotiations. I haven't heard the recording, but I've heard that this is the standard negotiation style, and I imagine he's saying the same thing to Ukraine because each side has to give something up and get something in return.
U.S. Secretary of the Army Driscoll was planning to meet with Budanov in the United Arab Emirates. The main intelligence directorate has not yet commented on this information, but the meeting could have been fateful.
And now, more details in our report. You are watching the Glover channel. I'm your host, Yevhen Serov. Like this video and subscribe to the channel.
U.S. Secretary of the Army Dan Driscoll arrived in Abu Dhabi on Monday to hold talks with the head of Ukrainian intelligence and a Russian delegation. Washington is insisting on reaching a peace agreement to end the war in Ukraine. This was reported by the Financial Times, citing an American official and 2 people familiar with the course of the meeting. It is known that Driscoll began negotiations with the Russian delegation on Monday evening. The discussions were also expected to continue today, November 25th. The composition of the Russian delegation was not immediately clear, but according to 2 people familiar with the situation, Driscoll was supposed to meet with Kirilo Budanov, the head of the main intelligence directorate of the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense. The GUR did not respond to requests for comment, the journalists write. They note that the meeting in Abu Dhabi took place after negotiations between Ukrainian and American delegations in Geneva. The U.S. Secretary of the Army also participated in the talks in the Swiss city. Driscoll has been very actively involved in this peace process over the past several days. He was obviously very involved, so he may be able to pass this information on to Russia. Clearly, Ukraine knows what is happening. They knew where he was going after Geneva, the American official emphasized. According to the official, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio and President Trump's special envoy Witkoff went their separate ways to continue this work on their respective sides. The nice thing about bringing Driscoll into the process is that you're adding rather than taking away, so he can continue negotiations and other similar activities. As Rubio said yesterday, we will continue this work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, making every effort and trying to act as quickly and aggressively as possible. It is still unknown whether the three parties in Abu Dhabi met together or held negotiations separately. The Financial Times also notes that Kirilo Budanov and the GUR maintained one of the few open channels of communication with Russia during the war, which made it possible to exchange thousands of prisoners of war and discuss other issues. Also, in the presidential decree signed on Saturday, Zelensky appointed Budanov as one of the 9 members of his official delegation, granting them the authority to participate in the negotiation process with the US and Russia to achieve a just and lasting peace.